Next, we're going to load, after the title and the abstract, we're going to load the introduction of the paper. And so let's go to this one. Let's copy the introduction. And paste it. By the way, the introduction is, you could paste into that window any long text that you'd like to analyze, because it does more than just analyze the introduction of a paper. Actually, it's independent. It doesn't use any of the information you gave in the title or in the abstract. So it could be a standalone if you want to evaluate just a piece of text. All right, so let's see what type of question is asked here. First sentence introduction that is really new information to a non-expert reader. If I read this, I discovered that the first sentence is really to introduce basic references, but there's nothing really new for anybody who's in this field. So that would not be the first sentence which is new. The second sentence, however, is much more interesting and newer. Okay, so this is it. One sentence that justifies why your contribution is needed. Actually, this one does a job. It explains why. And one sentence that justifies the method used to achieve. Okay, so actually, why we use this method? Okay, because it's simpler and because it's self-aligned. Okay, here we go. And what is the purpose of the last paragraph? Last paragraph is to show that it's applicable, generic, applicable to different structure, and you can use it to fabricate polarizers. So actually, it is the impact of the paper. All right, good. So we are done. We could start the evaluation. Every time you, but before we start the evaluation, may I recommend you save, and you save in the same file you had before. Here we go. Start the evaluation. This time it will evaluate everything, title, abstract, introduction, but the first two parts are very quick anyway. Introduction takes a bit more time to process because the Swan does a lot of analysis here, and you will see that very shortly. First of all, let's go into the evaluation result. Introduction. First of all, it shows you the sentence length with the number of words per sentence and the number of sentences here. And in black is the active voice sentence, so it means dynamic, interesting, and in blue, passive voice sentence. Now you can see a number of problems just by looking at the diagram of your introduction, or actually any part of text. First problem is this one. The first sentence of your introduction, instead of being punchy, is going to be a long sentence. Not a great idea. You have some variety close to the end, which is not bad, a mix of long followed by short sentences. But this part here in the middle, now that's a killer. Because you have, even though they're active voice, there are 3 sentences which are more than 30 words, followed by one passive, which is terrible, passive voice, which is 50 plus words. And so you know ahead of time that your reader is going to struggle in this part of the paper. Next, well, you have a lot of other diagnostic here, which you can look at. Again, every time you see more, you have more information, and so you can click on that to get more information. What's interesting here, it also gives you the text of your introduction with some words that require you to actually pay attention to these words, because they could be signs of problems in your writing. First of all, orange words. These are the words which are kind of imprecise, like various, often, more. You know, when you have a lot of orange in the introduction, it's not necessarily a good thing, because you could hedge, for example, in the discussion, but in the introduction, this is more factual. Not too many hedges found in the introduction. Why the cause for uncertainty it's not always clear. Sometimes people use these vague words just because they don't know. And so instead of giving an actual fact, they say something like several, but they don't know, they don't say which ones. So if you have several and you say which one, that's fine. But if you say several, you don't say which ones, then you are being vague and imprecise. And you may show that actually you don't really know all that much in what's happening in the field. So again, these are potentially dangerous words. Overstatements like always and never, that's always dangerous to use in a scientific paper. Judgmental words is in red. Now we have a number of judgmental words here: tedious, time-consuming, lack. Now lack sometimes can be a fact, in which case it's not a judgment, but lack could be a judgment, okay? And so you have to identify, are these really necessary? Because adjectives like that are usually claims, and these claims, if they're not justified, they're just claims. They're just, in a sense, bullying the reader into accepting your opinion without you having to justify your opinion. So this could potentially be a problem. It could also be a problem because these are judgmental words most of the time. And so it means that you're looking good, but at the expense of others. And so when others read this, it could be your reviewer, they may actually object to being portrayed in your introduction in such a bad light. Okay, so the red words are worth inspecting one by one. The yellow words also, there's two here. The yellow words, like in addition, are dangerous also because they often, in the introduction, reflect a poor fluidity in writing, so that your sentences are not all that well connected. Whereas in the conclusion, finding such words like moreover, when you're making a compelling case and you add fact after fact to show that you've achieved great things, this would be more words that you could find in a conclusion, but not so much in the introduction. And again, passive sentences in blue, so you can look at them in the context of your paper. So interesting, and I recommend that when you've done that, you actually export. And so we will export here. It's a big file, so I'll say results for my paper, and I'll leave that on the desktop. Save. Okay. Again, exporting will export the evaluation result, and saving saves the paper sections. Okay. Since we're here, we could actually look at the conclusion, but the tab cannot be clicked here because there's no evaluation result for the conclusion. So I have to go back to my paper, click on conclusion, and I will paste the conclusion of the paper, in this case, this one. Again, this one is a part which is inspected. I'm going to copy it separately. And the evaluation is very straightforward and very quick, pretty much. But remember, whenever you start the evaluation, it does the evaluation again of every single part of the paper. So the evaluation of the conclusion simply looks at the tense of your words, because the abstract should be at the present tense, but the conclusion should be written mostly at the past tense, with a few exceptions when you actually state facts. So the verbs in the present tense are here in orange, and so have a look at that. Is the present tense the correct tense to use here because you're presenting a fact, or should you use the past tense because you're narrating the work that you did in your paper? All right, so later on you can actually look at the visuals. Now you could the visuals is interesting development in the research when you want to evaluate a paper, because this time it's not just words, it's the structure of your paper. So you could add the visuals manually, like I will do now. So for example, I'll say I start with a table 1, and then the next one is going to be figure 1. Maybe we have another figure, and another one, and we'll stop there. Okay, so you can, if you made a mistake, you can move them up and down, up to you. Now this is interesting because you have then to click, you have to actually look at all your visuals and say, wait a minute, which is the visual or the visuals, there may be more than one, which is actually central. I mean, it really makes the point of my contribution so clearly. I mean, the reviewer will see it, this is the key visual. So if you have one, let's say it's this one, then you would click on this one. Then you have to actually look at this because it says, well, you know, like figure 1 explained figure 2. And what does that mean? It means that I cannot possibly, if I'm the reader and I jumped into your paper by flipping the pages at random and finding figure 2 and say, oh, that looks interesting, let me look at it. And if I, the reader, am not able to understand figure 2 without first looking at figure 1, then figure 1 explains figure 2. If figure 1 is not necessary, then you don't need to click there because it does not explain figure 2. That means that figure 2 stands alone. Okay, so this is how you would fill this matrix here. And maybe table 1 explains figure 1, and you could not understand figure 1 without looking first at the table. So once you've done that, you could also, by the way, detect automatically, but sometimes particularly if you have not imported your whole paper, it will not see that. So manually is a safe option here. So when you start the evaluation, it will again evaluate every single part of the paper, but also it will evaluate your strategy when it comes to the use of visuals in your paper. And that's quite interesting because it's very rarely done. And since visuals are so important in the scientific paper, you want to make sure you have a clear visual strategy. So you have a few plus signs here. But you have some problems, and so it is indicated here what would potentially be a situation which would create difficulties for the reader. Again, we're going to export the full evaluation result. And we are now finished with this part of the SWAN, which is the quick start, where you would examine parts of the paper one section at a time if you want.